Hi, this is Don Farber with VineyardSoft Corporation, and I'd like to welcome you to this fourth training session on query designing in the KnowledgeSync application. In previous sessions, we've begun to design a query to identify customer accounts in an accounting system where their 90-day balance is greater than a certain amount. Right now, we have that query highlighted in our list, and so I'm going to double-click on it to reopen that query and continue our work. As a brief summary of what we've done before, we have already chosen the tables from which this query is going to retrieve its data, and since we've chosen more than one table, we have linked these tables together. In the previous training session, we talked about selecting the various fields of data, referred to here as columns, that we want this query to retrieve from the underlying ERP or accounting database. Now we're going to talk about the following two tabs called Sorting and Filters. We'll start on the Sorting tab. The Sorting tab, quite simply, is where you're able to specify the order in which records that meet this query's criteria are going to be listed. For example, if you wanted KnowledgeSync to generate a list of accounts that have a 90-day balance in excess of a certain amount, we could say, let's sort this query by aging category 3. I happen to know in this underlying accounting system, aging category 3 is over 90 days old. So I could say that I wish to sort the matching records by the value in this field, and I wish to sort them in either ascending or, in this case, descending order. This will allow me to see the highest value accounts in terms of their over 90-day balance first, and then in a descending order. Now, you can choose multiple fields for sorting. So, for example, if I have multiple customers that have the same over 90-day balance, I might want to sort those customers perhaps by customer name. In this case, chosen in ascending order, so customers with the same balance will be listed in alphabetical order according to the client's name. For my purpose right now, I think I'll choose those two fields for sorting, and I do wish to impart just one more note about the use of the Sorting tab. You do need to carefully think about your query and the event in which it's going to be used and the types of alerts that it's going to send. For example, if I want KnowledgeSync to send each salesperson a listing of just their customers who have a balance of over 90 days, and I want salesperson number 1 to get a list of all of their customers, salesperson number 2 to get a list of all of their customers, and so on. In that case, I need to make sure that the query's results are sorted in such a way to group all of the clients for each salesperson together. I want all of those clients that are assigned to salesperson Smith to be listed together. Then I want to find all of the accounts that are assigned to salesperson Jones to be listed together, and so on. And so in an example like that, instead of sorting the records by the outstanding amount or by the client's name, I would actually want to sort this query according to the name of the salesperson or account manager who is responsible for these various accounts. So I'm going to scroll my list down a little bit further past all of my customer fields until I get to my salesperson fields. And in this particular case, I'm going to specify that I want this query sorted in order by salesperson name. That is going to ensure me that all of the clients for a given sales rep are all grouped together, and that will allow me in my event that uses this query to break to a new message for every new sales rep. Each sales rep being sent a single message just showing their clients who have a 90-day balance in excess of a certain amount. Okay, let's move on to the Filters tab, probably one of the most important, if not the most important, of all the tabs in the query design process. Because although we've chosen the tables and fields, etc. for this query, we have yet to tell KnowledgeSync how it is able to determine whether an account has a 90-day balance in excess of a certain value. In this particular example, it actually happens to be a fairly easy thing to do because in my customer table in this accounting database, as we've already discussed, there is a field that contains a customer's over 90-day balance, aging category 3. So let me select that field as a filter, and we want to retrieve only those customers where the over 90-day aging category 3 amount is greater than a certain amount. Let's say for the sake of argument, we're going to look for an amount of 100, whether it's dollars, pounds, euros, etc. So by doing this, I now have instructed KnowledgeSync to retrieve only those clients who have a 90-day balance in excess of 100. Again, whatever the appropriate currency is. I can actually jump all the way to the very last tab in my query designer at this point, the preview tab, and see if there are any clients that meet the criteria that I've specified. And you'll notice right off, we've got a number of fields of data, over 30 days, over 60 days, and here's our aging category 3, over 90 days, and we can see that that amount is in fact over $100. In fact, it's $4,607 in our case. Now let's jump back to the Filters tab. Just to make sure that this query is working correctly, let's take a look and see if there are any clients that have an age category 3 in excess of $5,000. We should not see any matching records, and in fact, we don't. Now, this particular query, as it's currently designed, is going to retrieve only those clients with a 90-day balance in excess of $5,000. But notice the name of the query. Accounts over 90 days in excess of X, in our case, X dollars. This is a very important aspect of query design because if within my organization I have one person who wants to know about accounts in excess of $100, someone else who wants to know about accounts in excess of $500, and a third person who wants to know about accounts in excess of $1,000, potentially I could create 3 or 4 or more different queries to satisfy each of those conditions. However, KnowledgeSync gives you a way to create a single query that can be used in multiple events, each event looking for a different threshold, $100, $250, $500, and so on. We refer to this as a parameter-driven query, and the parameter specifically refers to the presence of a question mark in the compare value field. That question mark truly equates to the X in the description of the event. What this is saying is that this query is going to look for any customer whose over 90-day balance is greater than a certain dollar amount, but that actual dollar amount is going to be specified on the event level, thus enabling me to reuse this one query in multiple events. Now, if I decide to make this query parameter-driven, and I think it's a good idea to do so, I've already mentioned that I'm going to prompt for this value on the event level when this query gets used within an event that I create. Well, if that's the case, if we're going to prompt for some value on the event level, we need to specify what that prompting text is going to say. And here on the query, we have the ability to specify what's referred to as the optional prompt for a filter. The optional prompt is utilized only for those filters that have a question mark in their compare value. And in fact, if I hit my tab key once, twice, 3 times, I find myself in that optional prompt field. I'm going to get rid of the pre-configured or default text from this field and put in something that I like a little bit better. Let's say over 90-day balance is greater, should spell greater right I suppose, is greater than, and that's going to be my optional prompting text. Over 90-day balance is greater than. This is going to make it very easy when someone chooses to use this query within an event. They're going to see what they're prompted for, and at that point, when the event is set up, a person's going to have to specify the particular triggering threshold for that particular event. Okay, so we've created a filter. Let's talk about filters a little bit more. You'll notice that the first component of the filter is where you specify the name of the field whose value you wish to test against. Following that is the value is or is not, and it's your choice to use either of those options. Following that is a list of operators, and you may have noticed that although our operator defaulted to equal to, we actually chose the operator greater than. And all of your typical operators, greater than, less than, etc., are all available for you to choose from within this drop-down list. But let me comment on a few of these operators. The one of operator allows you to make multiple selections for a single field. For example, if you are creating a query that looked at the status of support tickets, and you wanted to look for those tickets that had a priority code of 1 or 2 or 3, any one of those, you would use the one of operator. Again, that allows you to make multiple selections for possible answers or values to a field. Less than or greater than, pretty self-explanatory. The between operator, although it appears here as an option, quite honestly, we recommend that if possible, you not use it, instead using a more sophisticated, a faster executing operator. Now the between operator, as you might expect, is most typically, or would be most typically used for things like date ranges or numeric ranges. I want to look at all opportunities, for example, that are due to close between next Monday and next Friday. Now, although you could use the between operator, our experience has shown that this operator tends to execute a little slowly under most database systems. So, instead of using that operator, we actually recommend that you use two filters in its place, greater than or equal to and less than or equal to, because you will get the exact same result set from saying between next Monday and next Friday as you would from saying a date that is greater than or equal to next Monday, and then a second filter that says that that same date is less than or equal to next Friday. Again, using these two operators together in two filters will give you the same result set as using the between operator, but will execute much, much faster. Now, the starting with and like operators. Those operators allow you to do what I would refer to as string searches. I want to look for any customer accounts where the account name starts with a certain letter or series of letters. The like operator, another way of thinking of that, is to think of it as containing or contains. I want to look for any customer name that contains the following word or letters. Now, I do advise you to use both of these operators with a little caution, as anytime you start searching a database for string searches, those types of searches are typically somewhat slower than other searches, so use them judiciously. Try not to use them where you're going to force KnowledgeSync to interrogate thousands upon thousands, hundreds of thousands upon of records. That will cause the event to run somewhat slowly. Okay, down towards the bottom part of this list, we already talked about less than or equal to and greater than or equal to. And then finally, we have the operator null. Null means that a field in a database has never had a value in it. And it's important to understand that definition because the value of null is not the same as the value is equal to blank. Is equal to blank will return both null fields as well as fields that had a value in them but no longer have any value in them. That's considered blank, and that's the difference between null and blank. Null is a field whose value has nothing in it and has never had any value within it. Now, I would certainly recommend that you refer to the KnowledgeSync manual, the chapter on query designing, as there are a lot of other notes regarding the use of operators, a lot of advice on how to optimize your use of operators, and how to perform more sophisticated analysis of information in an underlying database. Now, let's put this back to where we wanted it, which is that value of over 90 days is greater than a certain amount. Now, and again, please do take a look at that chapter on query designing in the KnowledgeSync manual because it will discuss some additional items above and beyond what we're talking about in this training session. Now, just to continue on the Filters tab, when you choose a field of data from your application to test its value, to filter on, KnowledgeSync will automatically tell you what type of field or what type of value this field is going to contain. You'll notice in our case the type shows as number, because this over 90 days field is in fact a numeric field in the database. A field that would contain a customer's name, for example, would be a character field. A field that stores a date is going to show up as a date type. And then we also do provide literal, and that is for when you are specifying a value in the compare value field that you want KnowledgeSync to interpret literally. And for more details on that, take a look again at the KnowledgeSync manual. If we scroll this window to the right, you'll notice there is the ability to specify ands or ors. You can, in fact, create Boolean logic. For example, looking for conditions 1 and 2 or conditions 3 and 4. The exact details on using and or ors and the appropriate parentheses that need to be inserted are also in the KnowledgeSync manual chapter on query design. Now, although we could go and leave this query as is just with a single filter, I do want to talk about one additional kind of filtering, and that's filtering or performing a test on a date value. So let's scroll our list down until we find a date field such as the customer's date created. I want to talk about filtering on date values because there are a couple things to be aware of it. If, for example, we wanted to look at those customers that were created today, we could say that the date created is equal to, and we could say 11/8/2010, and simply put in today's date. But of course, if we do that and we want to run this event that uses this query tomorrow, we would have to come back in here and change the date from 11/8 to, of course, 11/9. Because of that, KnowledgeSync includes a very handy list of what are called date substitution variables. And to access those variables, you simply need to click in that compare value field and click on the list button that appears there. What you will see is the following window. Again, we've got our field, date created is equal to, and then we have to specify a value. Note on the left, available substitution variables. This entire list consists of date substitution variables, such as current date that you see at the very top. Also, if we scroll down a little bit, you'll see other dates, such as last Friday date or last Monday date, and then if we continue even further, next Friday, next Monday, next month start date, next month end date, yesterday date, tomorrow date. They are all here for use by you. So certainly a much more efficient way to handle retrieving records that were created today is simply to say current date. So now we have date created is equal to current date. And of course, note once again in that type field, this field is identified for us as a date field. That's how we know we can use one of these date variables. Now, to go back to this list of variables for a moment, you might notice that there are actually a heck of a lot of fields called current date, not just the one we chose. And that's because different applications store within their databases dates in different formats. Some applications store dates according to your system's regional settings. However, some applications do not, and actually hard code the date format within the underlying database. And so, although you might start out by trying the current date field and previewing the results of that query, if for any reason you're not getting the records you expect, my suggestion would be to contact someone or look into the database that you're monitoring and actually determine the format in which dates are being stored. It so happens that the accounting system that I'm monitoring right now stores its dates in the format YYYY-MM-DD. That's just something that I needed to find out for this accounting application, and so I would choose that formatted field to use in this particular filter. Okay, so I think we'll stop there as an overview of the Filters tab. But before we go, let's just cover one last topic. and that is down at the bottom right. I want to mention that we're going to be talking about this particular button, if column values have changed, in more detail in a future query design training session. As you might recall, there are three types of queries that can be designed in the KnowledgeSync application: a record level query, which is exactly what this query of ours is doing, an aggregate query, and thirdly, a value change query. And it is the third of those queries, a value change query, that makes use of this button down at the bottom right of the Query Filters tab. But we will be discussing that in a future training session. For right now, let's remove our filter on date created. Let's give our query one final test and see if it works as desired. Our optional prompt says over 90-day balance is greater than. Let's specify $4,000. If I recall, the value that is above that within our underlying accounting database is a value of some $4,600 for a single customer's account. And there we go. There's that age category 3 value, $4,607.18. I now feel confident that this query is indeed retrieving the appropriate records from our database, and I can save and close this query. Before I do, one final comment. We will not be discussing the following two tabs in this particular exercise. The Subfilters tab, you'll notice, is entirely blank. And subfilters, in fact, are used only in aggregate queries. This query being a record level query, we have no access to the Subfilters tab. The SQL tab I'm going to mention in a following training course. It is, if you will, a peek under the covers to see what KnowledgeSync is doing based upon all of the preceding tabs that we have filled out with information. And again, we'll talk about the SQL tab in a future session. What's important to know is that you never have to use this tab. And in fact, if you don't understand SQL syntax, that's no problem whatsoever, because that's what all of these preceding tabs are designed for. So let me hit save and close. We are now done with this particular query. I thank you very much for your time and attention to this training session on query design. My name again is Don Farber with VineyardSoft, and I look forward to working with you and speaking with you in future training sessions on the KnowledgeSync Alerts and Workflow solution. Thanks again for your time.